Well, hello, everyone. My name is Sherri Castle, and I am full of beans. Thank you for that kind introduction. I grew up in Watauga County. I went to high school in Boone, but my family was from a little farming community called Zionville, which is right on the North Carolina and Tennessee state line. So close so that while my grandparents' house and their garden was in North Carolina, every single one of their cows lived in Tennessee. So I was raised by people who we did grow most of what we ate. And I realized that in some ways I'm the last generation, at least in my line of Castles, that can say that. And we ate beans of some sort pretty much every day, year round. So in the winter we had dried beans that we had done, and in the summer we had a bunch of different kinds of what we just call beans. I mean, we use that word to mean so many things that it had every meaning and no meaning at the same time. But we grew up, and the little cup of beans I made for y'all today are examples of some of the beans that I was raised on. They are Appalachian heirloom beans, which means they've been around for a while, and they have beautiful evocative names that I grew up hearing, like I learned what to call the dogs and the chickens and even some of those Tennessee cows. So what you have in there are white half runners, regular half runners, turkey craw, cornfield, greasy bean, pink tips, and shellies. And I didn't have enough to give everybody a taste of everything, so I put them all together in one pot. But I kind of like the spirit of that because that is how I'm coming to think about the food of my youth. So when I was growing up, like many mountain families, when the beans came in, they came in hard and heavy. And when you live in the mountains with the growing cycles and the climate that we have, it's not just what can I get grown in 12 or 13 weeks, it's what on earth are we going to eat the rest of the year. So there was as much emphasis in our family, like in many mountain families, on how to make the harvest last, the 365 harvest coming around. And so we would pick beans, and we would pick beans, and we would pick beans, and then in the cool of the evening we would sit out on the carport in our lawn chairs, you know, those woven mesh ones that you can open with one hand when you get big enough, and they'd come out, and you'd sit down, and we would work up beans. And to learn to string these beans, and by the way, let me say that I believe that real beans have strings, okay? That there is flavor that you are unzipping when you do those things. So they have these thick, ropey strings that come off, and there's a rhythm to it when you get going. There's a little curly cue. You know, nature will tell us what she wants us to do if you'll just pay attention. There's a little pull tab that Mother Nature puts on those beans. You pull down one side, you round the bend, and you come around the other, and they come off. But you have to be an apprentice to learn to do that, to get them off with in the good rhythm. And then there was the breaking of the beans, and then there was shelling them out. And I want to say something about mountain beans. They are not a side dish. They are not a vegetable. They are not some little flimsy steamed French named crunchy thing. They are velvet. They are texture. There are nuance, and they were protein. They weren't a vegetable. They were and are protein. And so we would do those, and we would can them. We would can hundreds of quarts. In my grandparents' house, they actually built a canning thing in the basement where we could put 80 quart jars in a trough that the water would come in from the spring. We would build a fire under it and be able to process the canning for some of the beans and some of the things. And then some had to be pressure canned. And it is all we did for day and night, barely stopping to sleep for the weeks when the beans were coming in. And then there would be the leather breeches, which were beans that you threaded on long threads and dried. It was like bean stalactites coming down from the rafters, you know, that you would gather up and eat. And all this to say that by the time I was 17 and going down off the mountain to find a different life, I never wanted to see another bean as long as I lived. I was over beans. I was over them. I was over everything. Thought I was going to hit the big time. Well, I went down and noticed right off that there were many things I could not imagine at the University of North Carolina, and one was their beans sucked. I mean, it's like, what in the world is wrong with these people? And it took me, and I just like, I can't eat these. I just can't. And then I decided that I was going to become a famous, well, if not famous, at least accomplished Italian chef. And I went to Italy and I was studying and all this. And then there was one day there was this meal, and it was 3 different kinds of beans. And there was stewed apples, and there was cooked pumpkin, and there was hearth bread biscuits, and there was all this stuff. And there was sausage with just the right amount of garlic and all this. And I'm telling you, it was the best meal I'd had in my life that my grandmother did not cook. And I was in Umberto Day, Italy. And it was the food of my Appalachian childhood, not specifically, but in spirit, in localness, in heartfelt. That everybody's grandmama was the best cook and the finest food was in the household. And it was the epiphany of my lifetime, launched by a bite of righteous beans. Because it made me say, oh my Lord, I have come halfway around the world spending all this money to learn how to cook and respect and articulate and document and save the seeds and stuff of these people. Well, maybe that means what I need to do is have that same regard and respect for my people in our place. And I realized what a privilege, what a gift it is to be from a place that is a place. And you know what? I started understanding what my daddy meant when he said he missed him a mess of beans. Understood it was the flavor and the texture and the handiwork. And I'm like, how am I going to find these that I do not lose the last loose thread of the last bean? And it came down to seeds. Who are the people that are saving the seeds, that know how to grow the beans, that taste the way that my heart knows they're supposed to be? Now, I don't grow beans, but I help people find them. I, in the last week, have been in 4 states hunting for beans. Honestly, that's truly. I've driven almost 1,200 miles getting beans. I have canned 42 quarts and earlier this week before I did this, because the thing is, if there's no seeds, there's no future for something. When something goes extinct, it's gone. And I can help people find seeds. I can't grow them. But what I can be is I can remember a person that develops the taste memory. Because if we lose the taste memory of what something ought to be, it's gone forever too. So I'm out here feeding y'all beans, canning some from my daddy, sharing stories and so forth. But I want to encourage all of you, decide in your life. For me, it is beans. And I will hunt those seeds and I will share them. I made friends with this guy in Tennessee. And here's the thing about bean. If you've got one that will germinate, you can save the species. They are self-determinate, and I love the spirit about a being that way. And he'll grow them in Dixie cups, and he is so particular. If somebody brings him a bean they've never had, he carries them around in his truck with him in the cup holder, and he plays the radio for them real low, and they dance the little beans, doing so forth, until they get big enough that they're able to be out in the world. And every time I get a new bean, people will hand me one in an old coin purse or in a Band-Aid box or in something like that, and I'll take him to John, and John will hand raise these beans until we can taste them, and then grow more, and then taste them and grow more, because you got to know what the goal is, not just how do they grow, but what do they taste like. So in Watauga County, in addition to doing the different bean preservations, I'm trying to learn how to ferment them, the old-fashioned mountain way of fermented beans. It's a thing I'm learning to do. I inherited my family's crocks. I inherited the calendar, so I can do it by the signs. Anybody doesn't know what that means, we'll stand over here on the side later and I'll teach you about the signs. But I inherited their magic rock. I cannot tell you if that rock makes a difference, but I know I'm the 5th generation to have that rock, and I am not going to be the one to screw around with it. If they tell me to put a rock in there, that is what I'm going to do. And another thing I will tell you is I had the very great privilege of knowing the musician Doc Watson. He grew up with my Uncle Milton, and they were close, lifelong friends. And so I grew up knowing him, going to his house, having him come over and sit on our carport and so forth. And Doc and I, one of the very last conversations we ever had was about beans, okay? And Doc was saying, you know, I reckon that beans would be my last meal. And I said, I reckon it should be, because we could eat enough to kill us. And he said, I'll tell you what, he said, honey, honey, just cook them beans, because if you eat twice what there is, there's half of what you want. Thank y'all. Thank you.